Good evening, everyone. Um, Sorry I'm a little late. I guess you could say I've been kind of watching to see if anybody was going to pop in. And I know a few of you sent me messages beforehand. It looks like I was talking to myself earlier on here on my comments, but there was a comment, I promise you, above it. I'm not talking to myself, that it was a friend saying that they were going to miss it, but they were going to definitely catch the replay. And I thought that was really sweet of them to give me that kind of encouragement because it's not been easy for me. I can get on and sing like really easily, but to get on and talk um, is a little bit harder. So I'm going to try to make it like just a conversation that I'm having between myself and a friend. Which even that's hard for me because I don't have a lot of close friends, never really have as an adult. So Um, anyway, this is a first. You guys can pretend or hopefully consider yourself somewhat of a friend. Some of you guys came over from Facebook and did kind of grow up with me or know me through my late sister or family that has passed or something of that nature. So some of you are those people, and then some of you are new people that I've met and are getting to know and have been really amazing on my journey so far on this YouTube journey and me having a channel. Had this channel for a long time. Started out reading tarot cards. I think y'all can see a few of the old videos. Um, then I kind of tried to do it a little bit more recently. Um, and then I kind of just stopped for a while and didn't do anything with the channel. And then when I started doing karaoke on here, I thought, you know what? I'm going to start posting some of my songs. I'm going to start singing some on here. I'm going to do something with this channel. And I don't have any crazy beliefs that it's going to be a lot more than that. And so it's not, a big kickoff of something that I expect to happen. It's just it's something to do in between the songs so that you don't just click on here and hear a song and are like, I don't really like whatever kind of music, so I'll check back next time. It's kind of a story time about kind of who I am. And there's been a lot of talks lately about cults and especially true crime. True crime is something that I watch a lot of on here. A lot of you guys even probably have found my channel because you saw me in a chat or we chatted in a chat on a true crime channel. And it's just something that's always fascinated me. I didn't watch a lot of it when my kids were little because so much of it involved kids and it terrified me. Um, and my ex husband at the time, um, both he and I agreed, like it was the Nancy Grace type stuff on TV, that like we're not watching that with our baby in the room next. It just we can't imagine something like that. But as mine got older, and because of the field of study that I went into in college, I did major in psychology and criminal justice. Um, I worked part of my career as a substance abuse counselor with um, patients that had been in the system. They had been in prison, they had been in jail um, for not only just drug related crimes, but some violent crimes because of their substance abuse. Um, just different things. And so I didn't really get into the part of it that I wanted to necessarily as far as my career aspirations, but it did loosely affiliate. And I ended up being more of the counseling psychology part of it. And then I worked in other areas with adults, all in a more social work type counseling perspective. Um, so I wasn't like a cop or forensics person or anything that I really find fascinating. But I really was more of the psychology part of things. But anyway, that's an interest, and that may be another reason you found my channel. And I hope y'all can hear me okay. For someone who sings, I don't have a microphone. I just have just a laptop that's actually my kid's laptop, and I asked to reserve it for tonight. And my daughter's really awesome, and she does let me um, use it, or helps me get set up to even sing on the weekends on some of my friends' channels, um, and on here as well, and helped me get set up tonight because they know this is something I wanted to share. And I've had to put it off. I do apologize. I'm sure you can see, and I've lost subscribers because a lot of people are like, man, that's a lot of grief stuff you're posting. That's a lot of sad stuff. But this, unfortunately, is a season of a lot of really sad anniversaries of birthdays or anniversaries of losses. And a way that we grieve as a family, and that I definitely grieve, is I dedicate songs. And so there's going to be that kind of stuff on here from time to time, more during this season, unfortunately. And I know it's going to turn some people off, and I hate that, but it is what it is. And so, again, I wanted to do something other than music, and maybe to kind of explain a little bit of who I am. But back to the whole cult thing. Excuse me, because I'm going to be like sipping on my Mountain Dew in between. You can look up the definition of like what a cult is per se. You can watch all the stuff that's been coming out recently about like the Delphi case, and um, even actually some other cases that they're saying are loosely affiliated with cults or um, whatnot. And some of them that, they're new to the true crime community, like we've never heard of, like Odinism, or I think that's the way it's pronounced. And I've even watched some about that and looked up a little bit about it myself because I'm very interested, for whatever reason. I've always been more drawn to that when I'm thinking about true crime than anything else. Like, always. Starting with the Manson family. Like, I've always been fascinated on how just this little group of hippie kids that, got picked up as hitchhikers by this guy who had grown up in the prison system from day one, like spent his whole entire childhood, teenage years, and begged them actually not to release him because he didn't know how to live in society. But they didn't have room at the end for him. They let him go. And he ended up continuing with this life of crime. And if you want to break it down psychology wise, was he subconsciously even trying to get back into the prison system? Because that's what he knew. That's where he was comfortable. But nonetheless, he didn't have a family. And so he created his own family. And when we start looking up things about cults, that's what we see. That's what we think of. It's like, oh, the Manson family, and they're so, horrible and gory and this, that, and the other. And yes, it turned out that way. But there's so much more when you start studying it more in depth. And I have met people on here through studying that a lot, because that is a case where a family, a cult, whatever you want to say, that is fascinating to me. Um, because of how it started, because of the horrible way that it ended, and even the ongoing stuff with, a recent release of one of the members that, has been attempted through parole to be released many, many times. Thought they were going to get released, and then never mind, we're not going to release you. Denied, parole denied. And it was kind of like this almost this horrible game that they played with her. Like, parole board granted it. Yay, this is happening. I'm finally going to get out. And the governor overturned like 4 times. And then finally, most recently, she was let out. And you got to think, this girl went in at 19 years old, and she's coming out at almost 80 years old. 19, our brains haven't even fully formed. And she was part of this group of people that became her family. And she did some things not as brutal as the others. She was more of the driver and an accomplice type situation, and then after the fact did some things. So she had a little bit more of a chance to get out at some point, but I don't think she ever thought she would spend her whole entire life from 19 till now. And now I think there's at least one other member that's still living that has a chance to get out. There's two others that there's just no way ever they will die in there at some point. Um, but that's a whole huge case that you could unravel. That, like I said, kind of started my fascination with true crime and the subject of cults. And then more recently, I found a channel that I really, really like. And I've mentioned it on my community page. And listening to her tell her story about the cult that she escaped from, um, The Order is what it's called. And Amanda Ray is her name. And I can't remember exactly what her channel's called, but I've got it linked on there in one of the episodes. It's fascinating to listen to her life and about how she lived up until the time she escaped. And so there's a lot of really cool things, that you can learn about, and you'll never know how it felt for that person inside. Um, there's a lot of this stuff going on right now about the FDLS community, with the Ruby Frankie story, a lot of stuff about the Mormon community. And you can look at a list of what's considered a cult. Like I said, I'm not going to read out a dictionary definition because I don't believe in that very black and white definition. And you can look, I said, at all the cases that are going on and how these are suddenly coming back to light. And this topic is coming up. I did want to talk about it because only pretty recently did I realize, not by looking at a list of this religion is considered a cult, this religion is considered a cult, um, but just the ideas and some of the ways and actions, just how I grew up, the church that I grew up in, that I thought was just a church, just another church in a row of churches in a small town in what's the deep South, the Bible Belt. And I was born into this church. I went from day, I'm sure that my mom was okayed to bring a newborn into the little cradle roll class, is what they called it, and left at age 34 when I had my second child, my second daughter, my last. I have two, and that's it. But I have two daughters. Um, and I say that because it'll become more important toward the end of this. I'm going to talk about that, but at the beginning of this, I wanted to, before I forget, kind of tell you some, they could be seen as funny, I guess, interesting, whatever you want to say, but some things that have happened to me that are like culty or um, just weird that happened in my young adult life. I don't have a lot of really exciting stuff that happens in my life now, and in a way that's really good, and another way it's really kind of sad that I'm very limited, and that's why I do spend a lot of time on social media because I don't and am not able to get out and about. But in the time that I was able to, I did a lot of living. I did a lot of interesting things. And I hope that some of these in between the music type things, you're going to get to hear about that. I went to a lot of concerts, traveled, got to meet a lot of really cool musical heroes of mine, um, made a few friends that I'm still in touch with on Facebook because we were interested in the same music. And we would see each other time and time again at a concert. Um, I don't know. I'm going to have some of those in between. But as far as this topic, like I said, I kind of explained what led me to do it. And I'll do a second part because there's so much to unpack. And I need to see if anybody's even interested. I usually don't have anyone, maybe one, if I do a live, even show up. And if I do a second, what I wanted it to be was more of a question and answer off of this one, kind of piggybacked off of this one, and even maybe a panel. And it would be my first panel. It would be my first really having anyone on here as a guest. And I would love to do that in the future. And this is a great topic to do it with because, like I said, there's a lot for me to unpack, but to have other people have questions and or input of their own, I think that would be great. But some fun or interesting stories. Hang on one second. I'll start with one of them that most people find really interesting and that would have definitely led me into a whole different lifestyle and not right here on social media talking to you for sure. Okay, and then I promise I'll get to, for some of you, the more interesting part, which is my church upbringing. I kind of want to end with that because that's where I think the question and answer part will come and the panel part will come if there's even enough interest. And if not, then this is just a cool conversation I had to let you know a little bit about me. But one of the things, and I might blurt out something else that as it comes to me because I didn't write down anything. This is just me talking to y'all. But I was 19 and I went to New Orleans with my friends, two friends that I'd graduated with. Most of the people that we graduated with were going to Panama City, Florida. They were going to, party it up on the beach. But for whatever reason, I honestly don't know now looking back. We decided we were going to go to New Orleans. And it wasn't initially like, oh, we're going to go party. It was that we thought it was a very interesting place with a lot of historical, dark and interesting kind of things. And we went back a couple of times after that. We went for Mardi Gras. But the first time we went, we did a lot of the touristy type things, the cemetery tour, the voodoo tour, the vampire, type stuff where there's a lot of, films that were made there. There is so much history and old buildings there and hauntings and just the cemetery, some of the, the fact that they're divided into um, parishes and they have different rules and regulations there. And some of the different parishes and things that happened there, things that happened with the church. There's tons of true crime stories that surround New Orleans. And so I don't know if subconsciously I wanted to go there because there was all of that and that was all interesting to me, or if it was just this cool place that I always wanted to see what it was about. And it wasn't incredibly far from where I live. And it was doable as far as a drive. It was going to be about the same drive as the other group of people who were going to the beach. And, they were going to go get drunk in the sand or whatever. Nothing against them. That just wasn't something, I'd go to the beach all the time with my family or friends or whatever. And that wasn't new or interesting for me. So I just graduated and I'm an adult now or whatever, I'm going to go with my friends. So we went, and that first trip we stayed outside of New Orleans and We walked. We did a lot of walking to try to save money on cabs. And then we learned later about parking and walking and still being able to save money. But anyway, we learned a bunch of stuff. And I'm rambling. I'll get to the point. Not on the first trip, but the second trip was Mardi Gras, which was crazy. If you ever think of going, the group of people my age, when I've mentioned it, and I haven't gotten into this funny or whatever story I'm about to tell, they're like, oh man, I'm going to go. I've always wanted to go, in my lifetime at some point. And they're talking to me as like a 40-something-year-old. I'm like, no, your time has passed. It's not for the older and the weak of heart at all, or weak of body, because you do a lot of walking, you see a lot of crazy stuff, and it's definitely for a younger type of person. And I'm glad I did it, but definitely it gave me a story to tell. Um, we stayed at like a Ramada, I want to say, and there was a lot of partying going on there. And we didn't know anybody. It was just the three of us. And we had gone before. Like I said, a different couple of people went with me on the senior trip. This was the second trip I went back for Mardi Gras. And we had made plans way in advance, gotten a hotel closer, knew we were going to do walking, but not as much. Knew we were going to do some driving into town and then walking a little more. But we wanted to be in the center of it all. And we were. And it was so much fun at first, but there were literally so many people there that you could stand still and the crowd would lift you and carry you along with it. And I know that sounds very exaggerated, but that's how crowded the streets were at different points. Bourbon Street in particular. There were people on the balconies, which those rooms were incredibly expensive to get, even if you booked them a year in advance, 2 years. Um, a lot of celebrities were on those balconies. A lot of big groups of teenagers that I guess all pooled their money together and rented or whatever. And they were hanging off of there and they were throwing out beads. And, like I said, these huge groups that you were lucky if you could stay with your friends without getting separated. And I did get separated. We'll get to that. But yeah, we got beads. We realized pretty quickly there was no drinking age there, really. I saw kids that were, I don't know, 12, 13 years old. One poor little kid, God, I'll never forget. He was walking by me and he looked so sick. And I was thinking, God, it's sad. I'm here to have a great time. But this little kid is drunk off of his ass and he is so sick and he doesn't even know what's going on. And I hope he has a friend or someone nearby. And he was just kind of mumbling to himself, like, I'm going to be sick. I'm going to be sick. And next thing I know, he throws up all over my shoes. I'm like, great. Thank God I have on Doc Martens and I can kind of shake it off and move on and hope the poor kid's going to be okay somehow. Because I couldn't save everybody. I wanted to try to help the people I could because I am someone who, oddly enough, when I was young, and wasn't of drinking age, I did, follow my older sister and hang out with some of her older friends. And I drank. And I can remember a couple of occasions only where I got quote unquote drunk. But I can't get drunk. And I know a lot of people are like, that's BS. Yes, you can. But I can't. And I actually made a bet while we were down there at one point and had some people say, oh no, just wait and see. I can make sure, we'll get you drunk. We'll spend all the money we can at this bar and you'll walk out of here drunk. And I was like, okay. And, what do I get if not? Because I knew. And it's a control thing. It's a mind thing. It's not like something defective about my body, but it's something like people who can't be hypnotized or whatever. Like when I was very young, like I said, there was a couple of occasions. And then other than that, I literally just couldn't. My friends could be just wasted after two or three hurricanes or hand grenades or whatever the cool, drink was. And I might have one of them just to say I had a hand grenade in New Orleans and I got the cute little floaty plastic hand grenade, or I got the hurricane or whatever. But it was just like having a little tropical punch or whatever. It did nothing to me. And so I got kind of big. I was the designated, like making sure everyone was okay person. We weren't always driving, but I mean, hell, I was the designated walking person, trying to keep us all together in this huge, huge crowd. And they fixed it where if you even had to go to the restroom, you had to pay a cover charge to get in to go to the bathroom. And I had some crazy stuff happen, even just trying to go to the restroom. It was an expensive trip based even on that, just having to go to the restroom. And I saw some insane things. Walking, I had someone right beside me. I happened to look down at my side because I kept feeling something scrape against me. And there was someone literally holding a knife, just right out to the side, jabbing where it was going to stick right in me if I moved a certain way. I started trying to be really, really aware of my surroundings because everything and anything was going on. People would grab you up and just start kissing you. Just, I'm not talking about a little peck, but just like throwing down. And you would not know this person, have any clue who they were, and you would just be like, what is happening to me? And, bear in mind at this point, I'm 19. My friends are wasted. I'm trying to make sure we're sticking together, whatever. I'm getting here to the cult part, I promise. Another night that we were there, I was wearing, and this was the grunge time, 90s or whatever. I was wearing like overalls, like big oversized overalls, and like a bodysuit underneath it, and Doc Martens. And I literally had people like trying to stick their hands down the sides of my overalls. I'm like, thank God I had the bodysuit on, and I was slapping hands and praying there wasn't another dude like the other one with the knife scraping up against me. And learned pretty quickly we needed some protective things of our own, some mace, something. And we had a cool little alarm that went in our hotel room door so that if you moved it, this horrible screeching sound would go off. And you just kind of jabbed it in between the door. And we did that to have just like as extra protection. Although I'll get to that in a minute as well. That was kind of pointless at some point because my friends were just having the time of their life. And I ended up like being more of, I wasn't like the buzzkill, but I was definitely the more responsible party. Not giving myself a pat on the back. I just couldn't physically, mentally, whatever the thing is in my brain that has a control issue, I could not get drunk. And I even made some money off that with those guys that said, we'll get you drunk. They spent probably about $300, no kidding. I mean, obviously the drinks are expensive, jacked up the prices everywhere you went, but they spent so much money collectively, a group of them, and they were so disappointed at the end of it that they had failed. And I think we bet them $50 and we won. So we walked out of there with like enough for a cab ride if we wanted to take one back. So there that went in my little pocket of my overalls. And I laughed, thinking, well, I guess if we need some, quick money, I can always
find some guys and or whoever and bet them, and no one's going to believe me, and I can literally sit there and drink, and I'm not going to be drunk. I'm going to feel sloshy and gross, but I'm not going to get drunk. And some of y'all is probably going to listen to this and be like, well, that's sad, but true. So another thing happened, um, and it was that we saw a lot of people, a lot of famous people while we were there that were up on the balconies. And one of the occasions that I remember really well, um, my friends and I had been together all night, and this is where we're going to kind of get to the culty story before I move on to something else. We had been together, all night. We had been seeing people and being like, "Ooh, I love those beads around their neck," and it was like, what do we do to get those beads? And for some people, it was just like, that it's cool that where y'all from, whatever. I like, those beads. I'll trade you, or just they're nice and they gave them to us, like whatever. Because I wasn't willing to do anything crazy. I was definitely, and when I get to the end part and talk about how I was raised, my religious beliefs, I was definitely the more reserved of the three of us. Um, my other two friends were like, I'll lift my shirt up, I'll do whatever, for those beads. And I'm thinking, those are some freaking plastic beads. I'm not doing nothing like that, whatever. So consider me not fun. I don't know. Just, I wasn't going there. Maybe it's because I wasn't drunk. I have no idea, but I didn't go there. Um, they also, at one point, again, we're we don't have that much money. We've saved up to go on this trip, but we don't have a lot of money, and we're not carrying it with us. And I was kind of the responsible person for the money too, because I knew where to hide it on my person without getting it snatched. Because again, if you stood still in the middle of the road and you weren't on the sidewalks, it was a parade of people and you would get lifted up and just carried with it wherever it was going. And if you're standing in front of one of those balconies with one of the celebrities underneath, you would be suffocating. Literally, it was horrible. Just to look up, neck breaking up, and hopefully catch a glimpse of this celebrity. Um, my friends, I remember a couple of guys or a group of guys, like in togas or something, like just, I don't know, a group of them just acting stupid drunk. They were like, if y'all will kiss each other and let us video it, we'll give you $50. And I looked at them like, y'all, whatever y'all want to do, I'm not in. But they did it. $50. Here, you hang on to it for us. And so I was the keeper of the money because they knew they were going to be dropping it. Who knows what they were going to be doing with it. And so they knew I would be the one to make sure it was okay. I wasn't going to get drunk with it, clearly. So they did that. They did the crazy stuff and got the beads. I only remember one crazy or weird, funny thing I did, and it. I don't know. I don't even know if it was that crazy, but there was this really cute guy at the time. I thought long hair, kind of my mo that I always liked, bad boy looking top. And funny enough, he was with his mom. Didn't know that was his mom. Thought it was just some older chick he was hanging out with. And he had these blue beads, and I was obsessed with the color blue for some reason. Still kind of am, but I was like, I always wanted a blue streak in my hair. I had blue Doc Martens. I wanted a blue car. Like, just, I was obsessed with the color blue. And I had to have these beads. There was not that much special about them other than that they were blue and they were kind of unique because I hadn't seen anybody else with like these specific beads. And the dude was just, really nice. We talked for a few minutes and he's like, if you kiss me, I'll give you these beads. I was like, at this point I've been grabbed up by strangers and kissed or whatever. So, okay, whoever this chick is standing beside him clearly doesn't care or whatever. So did that, got the beads. And that was like, when I'm trading back and forth beads, no one's getting those blue beads. I don't care if I go home with one set, those are mine. I love them. These are the bomb, keeping them. My friends and I continue walking around, and, we're laughing, we're having a good time. We've done all kinds of fun, crazy stuff. And I'm thinking at that time, with my grandma self, we're winding down for the night. We're going to figure out a way. We're going to either drive, uh, we're going to get a cab, we're going to whatever. We're going to get back to our hotel and rest up for the next day's festivities, because we were going to be there for, I don't know, 4 or 5 days. And we had other things we wanted to do. We wanted to get a tattoo. We did end up doing that as well. Not matching, but we all got a tattoo. Um, that's a whole nother story. But anyway, I got something to commemorate the trip with. I think it was 1996. Yeah, 1996 Mardi Gras. Um, and I do have a nice tattoo on my back shoulder blade to commemorate that. We all, like I said, we all got one. It was like in one of the days following this. But we're on like the sidewalk. We got over to the sidewalk part, and we're walking along the way, and I see this guy, and again, fits my MO. Long hair, attractive, looks like Eddie Vedder. And at the time, Pearl Jam, those kind of groups were super popular. And this guy just really stood out, just super, super, super hot. And out of the three of us, we all three were very different looking, my friends. One of my friends was super tall girl, long, like waist long, red hair, freckles, like just ginger, pretty girl, but just like totally different looking than the other two of us. The other one, tiny little petite brunette, naturally curly hair, very innocent looking, but definitely not. After we, have done these crazy things, I realized they're the two wild ones of the group. And then there's me, who I look more of the part of the whole grunge era. Like I said, I was dressed in like this one night. I don't even know if it was this particular night, but one of the nights, like I said, the overalls and the bodysuit and the Doc Martens, and I might have even had like some braids on the side of my hair with some beads in it or something. I don't know. I was trying to be special and different. But we walk up on this guy, and I'm thinking, if we meet anybody, like I'm gonna be the probably one of the three that like is gonna fall back. I'm not gonna really be the one that stands out as like the, I think looking back, I was an attractive, pretty girl, but I didn't stand out as much as my other two friends. And I definitely was not as outgoing. So I think people could read that maybe. And after studying more later on about cults and about things, I realized that this guy knew what he was doing. And he could definitely sense, out of the three of us, why he said what he said, why he did what he did. But as we're approaching him, and we're all laughing, and I've gotten my blue beads from this other guy, and it's like, we're looking around. This guy, oh my God, he looks like Eddie Vedder. He is so hot. He's coming toward us. What is he going to say to us? Oh my God. Why is he walking toward me? And they're over there at the side, like, what's he going to say to you? And they're just like laughing, knowing I'm going to be completely awkward. I'm going to have no clue what to say, like, whatever. So he comes up to me, and he has a dollar bill, and he looks down at the dollar bill, and then he looks up at me, puts it on my forehead, just flat on my forehead, and then smiles at me, and then like just touches my cheek and just looks at me like I'm the most beautiful girl in the world. And he says, "You're her. You're the chosen one." And I was like, "What?" Like, can you repeat that, please? Hot Eddie Vedder looking guy. And he's like, yes, you're the chosen one. You're her. And I was just like, okay. And my friends were kind of like hanging back. They were still there, but they were kind of like walking over, stepping over a little bit, just seeing. Like, we're either going to end up laughing our ass off at her, or we're going to learn something from this, or this is going to be a story we tell, which here I am telling y'all. So he pulls me over to the side and he starts talking to me about how he's with this group of people, this group of friends, and how they've all came and stopped in for Mardi Gras, but they're going to another town the next day, and how they kind of travel around and they're this, carefree group of friends, and they make music. There's another ding ding to my heart. Hot guy with a guitar or somebody that can make music. I always laugh and say, put put a guitar in a guy's hands, and if he can play guitar, he immediately becomes like one shade hotter. I mean, that's just the way I've always been attracted to musicians, always. And so he's got a guitar case he's carrying. He's got a group of friends, some of them kind of, attractive or whatever, but he's definitely the leader and definitely stands out. And he's made me feel super special. I'm the chosen one. I'm her. And he pulls out this little magazine type thing. We called them zines back in the day. And they had like poetry in them. They had like some little, like a newsletter type thing. I don't know. It had all this stuff. And then a cassette tape. And it was like, yeah, we're selling these to kind of fund our trip from here to here. And we all kind of came together, in a van, and we're just, sort of trying to take it, the cheap route so that we can travel while we're young and we can see all the country. And, it sounded like kind of the whole backpacking across Europe thing, but on a cheaper, different scale across the United States with your group of friends, right? I'm totally naive, don't see anything. I mean, now looking back, if I was that girl, I would be like, okay, you're running a scam. I'm getting the fuck away from you, whatever. But the moment I'm feeling like the most beautiful girl in the world, listening to him, looking at the magazine, he's handing me cassette tape, okay, and saying, listen to this tonight, check out our music, read this, and like meet me at this place tomorrow. And it was like a central location. If you've ever been to New Orleans, there's Jackson Square, and there's a lot of kind of just rough people around there. There's a lot of talented people that have booths set up and they read tarot cards, or they do palm readings, or they play the musical things with like the water in the different vases. And you know what I'm talking about. And there's people that do caricature paintings. There's the people that are like painted silver and they stand still for hours at a time. The horse and carriage people that, you pay and they take you on a little carriage ride. So they surround like this whole square right there with the church. And then in the middle is like this beautiful garden top area and a fountain. And you see a lot of these people who are homeless, or a lot of them are kids, like teenage kids or whatever, and they're like literally bathing off in the fountain. And you can tell like they're asking for food. If you have like a bag of food that you're taking from a restaurant, they're literally asking for food, not even for money, but just like for food. So there's a lot of rough people hanging around there. And at this point, I've realized there's a lot of rough people everywhere, but there's a lot of interesting people. And I'm young and I'm naive, so whatever. And he's like, meet us here. And I want to say it was at the fountain. And I was like, well, that's a really public place. It's, he's not going to drag me away and like, you know, do anything horrible because there's all these people that are going to be watching. But he's like, read this, listen to some of our music, check us out. And, meet us back here in the morning if you want to go with us. We really want you to go. And then he like pulled me further over to the side, just me and him. And he's like holding on to my hand. And he's like, I want you to go. I need you to go. You're her. And again, here I am thinking, wow, I have met this person that I'm destined to be with. Again, naive, 19 years old, Mardi Gras, 1996, totally different time. No cell phone, no nothing like that going on. Just I'm in a moment and it is what it is. So I'm like, okay, I'll take this back to the hotel tonight. We're trying to get out of here anyway for the night. And while we're, winding down or whatever, I'll read all this, I'll check it out, and maybe I'll see you tomorrow. I didn't make a promise. Thankfully, I didn't tell him exactly where we were staying because I'm pretty sure they would have rolled up and been like, we're going to stay in your hotel room. We need a place to lay our heads down. Because they were truly like, if you've ever been to a Grateful Dead show, I've been to one. I'll do a story about that later. Um, they were all probably sleeping in the van and they're going to get ready to move to another town the next day. But here was a big opportunity for this group of people to probably sell their cassettes, maybe sell their magazines, recruit people, which I'm going to figure out later. But in the meantime, we're headed back to the hotel. I'm feeling like the most beautiful girl in the world. Got me some blue beads, whatever. Get back to the hotel. I start reading the little zine. And I'm really into poetry at the time. And I write poetry myself. And I snuck out to the car to smoke. And my friends smoked cigarettes, but they didn't smoke weed. So I was kind of alone in that because they were mixing up drinks in their hotel room, and I could have cared less about that. It wasn't going to do anything to me. It was a waste. So while they were mixing them up a drink for the night, they were laughing about whatever had happened and showing each other their beads or whatever. Planning the next day, I went out to the car, listened to some music, rolled up, smoking, reading this zine. And I'm like, this is cool. Some of this poetry is really good. And I pop in the cassette tape and I'm listening and I'm, getting chilled out for the night, getting zoned out a little bit and kind of coming down from this crazy day. And I'm like, I don't really dig the music. It's not that great. It's like a lot of drums, a lot of bongo top things, and more of like a spoken word top thing. And if that's your jam, then cool. But it wasn't my type of music, but I respected it. The dude, when I met him, had the guitar. He seemed hot, interesting, whatever. So I was sure he told me they had there was other music, there were other magazines, that this was just the one they had on them at the time to hand out. So I'm listening and I'm just like, whatever. It's interesting. I'll listen to it while I'm smoking and then I'll go back into the room, go to sleep. And I start reading more and I realize it's called, and sorry if anybody is listening on here, I really doubt they're going to find my little channel because it seems like they've disbanded from what I can tell, and or combined with some other cults or groups and they've renamed themselves. But I did find a few things on them. All these years later, I was like, I'm going to look these people up and see if they still exist because I almost became one of them. But they were called Zendik Tribe, Zendik Tribe. And I was just like, I just kept thinking, this sounds good. These guys are writing poetry. They're getting to see the whole U.S. They're with their friends. They seem like this close knit group of family. Like, I could really use that right now. I only have a couple of close friends. I'm in college. I have a little job at the mall part-time job. I have a car. I mean, I have all the things. I'm all lined up for, where I end up eventually in my career. But at the time, like this escape, this cool adventure, it sounded good. And plus, hot Eddie Vedder guy, I definitely wanted to go somewhere with him. So I kept like going back and forth in my head and reading more and more. And thank God that I didn't just skim over it and I really read into it. And I realized that it's called Zendik Tribe. But when I start reading deeper into it, and there's like a mailing address for donations, that it's a farm, Zendik Farm, and that they live off the land and that they grow all of their own food, that, they all live together, that it's kind of a, what do you call it, a free love type, situation. Like they are not in committed relationships, they're sharing relationships. Uh, they're not committed to any one certain like denomination as far as a church. They are the church. It's just, I started having a really weird feeling about you probably shouldn't meet this guy because he's saying he only wants you to come, not your friends, because you're the chosen one. And he wants you to bring your things and he wants you to go with them to the next town and the next town. And like, here's your chance for this cool adventure. And whatever in my gut, thank God, thank whoever in the universe, I didn't go. But I was hand chosen, I believe, out of my friends because I had this naive look on my face. I wasn't giggling drunk like they were. I looked a little bit more serious. I don't know. Like my ex used to tell me, I had this look about me that like I can't really lie. I can't, I don't know. That I just had this look about me where I'm not going to get away with anything. That I'm very honest, very transparent. That's just who I am. And he was so the opposite of that, which is why we didn't work out. But that's a definitely whole nother story that I probably never would tell on here. But kept thinking about it, kept reading, realized I'm going to be living on a farm. I'm going to be living in this free love thing, which, like I said, parts of it at the time didn't sound so bad. Sounded like an adventure. And like, if I want to get off at any stop, the way he's sounding, I can do that. I don't have to commit completely to this. But the more I read and the more I study, it's like, yeah, you are going to have to commit to this. And he is the one who stood out from the rest of them because he was the most attractive, the most charismatic, the whole dollar bill on my forehead. I'm still not sure about that, why that was what he did. But the whole, like, just looking me deep in the eyes and saying, you're the chosen one. And my friends are even like, what, why you? Like, what's the deal? No disrespect, but like, why is he like just so in love with you or whatever? Because it was like that. It was like this deep connection or something. But I don't know. Thank the weed. Thank the discernment I have reading the magazine, the music, whatever it was. I didn't meet him the next day. I didn't even go by out of curiosity. I kind of wish I would have now to just see if there were other girls that followed him to this van and left. But I carried it home with me and put it away with like some of my other little souvenirs and stuff that I had gotten that night or the whole trip. And later, like I said, years later, after telling the story to people and kind of laughing about it like it was not a big deal, I looked them up. Like you can look them up right now. You'll only find a couple of things. Like I said, I think they've disbanded or renamed or whatever, joined together with another group. But you can find a few things. But it's Zendik Tribe. And so your girl here almost became a cult member. A real legit I said I wasn't going to sit here and read out the definition of cult, but to me, different than what I grew up in a very unconventional kind of way, which I'm fixing to get to, I promise. But this was another level that I almost ended up going, thinking it was just going to be a cool pre, before things got super serious in college. I was in my beginning, getting your prerequisite classes in, working my little part time job, had a Camaro, just had this cool little 19-year-old life going. And I thought, I'm just going to step out for a little bit with hot Eddie Vedder guy. And thankfully, I didn't, because I was going to be in a true 100% commune/cult, where they have a whole belief system that's very different from what I had grown up in, or what anyone in kind of the norm of society, anything probably what y'all know about, just really different. And so thankfully, I think to this current day, I still have the cassette tape. Um, I might have a place where I can play that cassette around here somewhere. I think I have an old boom box or jam box or whatever you want to call it, cassette player. I think I have one that exists in this house. But it's like the whole drumming type music. And then I think if I dug deep enough into like some of my souvenir type stuff that I have tons of from places I've been, I could probably find that zine that had the poetry and that had the mailing address to the farm and all of that. Because it all goes back to, there was like this one older man who started the tribe as like a commune and a farm. And I mean, almost like the Manson family, only they didn't, from what we know and what I've learned, they didn't go out and do anything like that and didn't become notorious. They actually kind of disappeared, but lived more of a commune type lifestyle. But I would have, from what I learned later, I would have ended up traveling with them, and I would have become like the girl version of that guy. They would have picked someone like me who was naive, who was an attractive person for the time, who looked very serious, and I would have become like a recruiter. I would have gone to these big festivals, places where there was going to be a lot of people. We would have kind of hung back as a group, pinpointed out a few people. I would have went up to that person, handed them the magazine, the cassette, recruited them just very seriously, whatever, talked them into this great life that, come with us. And so that was like their whole agenda. So your girl here almost ended up in a cult, commune, leaving her two friends behind because it sounded like a cool idea at the time. 19 years old, didn't really have any other big commitments. And I don't know, why not? I was like into the whole thing. I was into all of that. Like I said, I ended up majoring in school into psychology, criminal justice. And at the time, like I hadn't gotten deep into any of that, but I wrote poetry. I was into musicians, and this guy, he was everything they needed in a recruiter because he had me sold. Almost. Almost. So, anyway, you can look them up, check them out. And I didn't go too deep into who they are now, but from what little I looked into, they split and became like two other groups. And I think you can still get a couple of their songs, and you'll get bored like I did, probably, unless you love drums. There's a lot of bongo, a lot of drums, and just kind of nonsensical stuff you can't really make out. Not my kind of thing. The music, had it been a little bit more geared toward what I liked, I don't know, maybe I would have went, because the zine was really interesting and cool to me as a writer, and I don't know. Anyway, almost ended up there. So I don't want to ramble on for too long because I love that story. I can literally like smell, feel, be there again if I close my eyes. I have a great long-term memory, so I can remember what I had on exactly, what I looked like that day, down to the color of clothes I was wearing, shoes I was wearing, everything. Exactly what he was wearing. And my friends have always thought that was crazy. But I can tell you, if anything significant happened in our lives on any day, exactly what we looked like, whose car we were in, where we went. Like I had a great detailed memory, which came in handy. Um, I have another New Orleans story that I'll share another time, where my memory saved our ass big time, big time. And it was a well, not a totally different group, but the redheaded girl I was talking about, she and I went with two other people on a different occasion. And on that occasion, my memory came in super, super handy. But New Orleans was a place we kept going back there because there was so much. Like we could go there a million times and never see it all and never learn everything there was to learn about it, because it's just it's an amazing place. I encourage you to go, but if you're in my age range, you're in your 40s, probably Mardi Gras, unless you're in peak physical shape, it's not going to be for you. It is wild. It is a lot of walking. I could not do it. 110% would not even attempt. I'm not in the physical condition to even do a hometown little sad music festival that we have here in our hometown, much less try to do something like that. Not anymore. But back then I did do it. It was fun. It's a story I can tell whoever wants to listen, or if I want to get on here and ramble. Um, and I'm glad that I did a lot of the things I did when I could, when I was able to, because I have a lot of stories to tell, a lot of really cool things, a lot of cool people I met. And so now I will segue into my upbringing, my religious beliefs, is what I guess you could say. And hang on one second, even though this is really bad for me, I'm going to smoke a cigarette while I get into this. And yes, it's a cigarette. No, not back in the day weed for me, just a cigarette. And Mountain Dew, which is also bad for me, but I love it, live it, breathe it. My kids are like, the only water you drink, Mom, is the ice that melts into your Mountain Dew. And sad, but true. I'm trying to work on that, but I'm not trying hard enough. Okay, so like I said, I was born into a religion. I was not given a choice like I've given my children. We visited different churches with them when I was still married, while they were young, growing up. Um, we went and visited several churches. They went to preschools that were at churches. I gave them a choice because of my upbringing. And there's going to be a couple of people on here, probably, like I said, that come over from Facebook. I hope they're not offended because they went to this church or grew up with me or whatever, because I don't mean any ill will. I wouldn't, because my family that are now gone, passed on, they were a part of this, and I miss them. And I wish many of them were back here with me so badly. But later in my life, I sort of put pieces together and realized, even though I didn't go off with Eddie Vedder guy and live a very, very strong word or term, as if you want to say cult or commune way of life, in another sense, I kind of was already in a cult per se, because the church that I grew up in is actually listed in, when you look at people that are being studied right now, like the FDLS community, the Mormon community. Like I was talking about the young lady that I watched, that she's very inspirational, the Order. and some of them definitely more extreme in the fact that they lived in groups and communes versus that just they were a church. And most of these churches, when you went to one, there was only one in that small town. And in my small town, even till current day, there are two. And it's not that we're so big we need to have two. It's just that there was one main church, and then it was kind of like in the city, and then there is like a secondary church that kind of split off from there. Not split off as far as we believe different things. They're just as strict, same belief system, everything. They're like the sister church, just a different building, located more in like the country top farming whatever area at the time. Because like I said, I grew up there starting in the mid 70s. My mom started going there in the 60s and grew up in the church, just in a different building, her whole life. She was this religion as well. And some people abbreviate it and put COC, but it's the Church of Christ. And you see people say Church of God in Christ. There's a whole bunch of different things in the South, but this one is specifically just straight up. You'll see it abbreviated as COC, just straight up Church of Christ. And like I said, again, born into it. And most of the people that I went with, there were a lot of older people there, not a lot of young people at all, just a handful of us. But we had our own camp, summer camp that we went to, that pretty much everyone that went were, their mom and dad went to the Church of Christ. They were born into it. That's where we went for our summer camp. We had a few youth activities, and I think kind of as I was getting older and wasn't like a teen anymore, they started getting a bigger group of young people. There started being another boom as far as people that had kids. So they ended up having to have a youth minister and come up with some different youth activities and stuff. And they went like ice skating and bowling and I don't know, stuff like that. And they would go to singings, because one of the main principles of the church was no instruments, no piano, no, like you'll go to some modern churches now where they have drums and guitars and stuff that I would definitely be very drawn to. And we visited some of those churches, me and my children, once I broke away from this church I'm speaking of that I grew up in. But the church I grew up in was a cappella only. So I did learn to sing, but I was held back in a way because I wanted to lead singing. You would have someone up at the front that would lead singing, and they would have a little pitch pipe, and they would blow into the little pitch pipe to kind of show you, you're going to follow this pitch and you're going to sing the song, and they would lead the song. And I always wanted I wanted to get up there. I wanted to lead the song, but the women were not allowed to do that. The women had a very specific role in the church, which is how I ended up later in life, sort of like, piecing all this together. And later deciding, after I had 2 daughters, to leave, which wasn't an easy thing to do when my whole family still went there. And some of the remaining extended family members I have, they don't live anywhere near me. I think, I'm not even sure, because I don't talk to them. I think maybe one that I can think of might still go to a Church of Christ, but it's in another area, another state. And like I said, in most towns, there's only one church building, but in some, there's two. And I'm going to kind of backtrack from the no instrument thing, because there's a whole lot of list of things of why I realized later that yes, this actually is in a lot of ways defined as a cult, and not necessarily like, ooh, Charles Manson cult, but just a cult as far as the belief system. There were two churches in like the country area, and one is the one that my mom and my grandparents grew up in, whatever, in that area. And there was another one like a little bit further out. And they realized that they didn't have like a big number, but if they would combine into one building, that if they made it midway in between, that they would have a decent number every Sunday, Wednesday night, whatever. And so they ended up naming it Midway. Sorry to dox myself in a way, but I haven't told you where exactly I live. But anyway, growing up, went there. My grandfather was an elder of the church, which meant he was one of the founders. And there were 4 elders. They were all, older men who had been in the church for a long time. They were very looked up to, respected. That was expected of you to respect whatever they said, their guidance, as well as the preacher. And then underneath the elders, you had deacons, and each one, or I think there were 2 deacons for each elder. There were 4 elders, 8 deacons. And they were sort of like elders in training, so that when those elders passed away or decided that their health was in a state where they had to step down, those guys were kind of ready to step in. And so they kind of watched and followed in everything those guys did. And it was an honor to be a deacon under these elders. And it was like almost voted upon. Not by the women, but voted upon by the men of the church on who were going to be deacons. And the elders' vote definitely had more weight on who were these 2 guys that are going to be underneath me training. And we had to respect them. I would have respected my grandfather anyway, because none of this is saying anything against him. He was an amazing man. He was a very giving man. I couldn't have asked for a better grandfather. And this was a belief system that he was even born into. My great-grandfather was in this church. So, for, whatever that means, it was just something that he grew up in, and it was a belief system that worked for him, that had worked for his family, and he wanted his family to follow. And we live in the South, where men are always very looked up to anyway. And, you have a family that has 3 daughters and 1 son. The mother is going to look at that son, and they hung the stars, the moon, and the sun. And the daughters, obviously they love their daughters, but the son is going to carry on the name. Kind of the same thing with the church here that I'm talking about, and any Church of Christ that still operates to this day. Again, one of the things that's kind of different and makes it stand out, again, is no music, no musical instruments at all a cappella singing, because they go a lot by the Old Testament versus the New Testament, in that the Bible says make music with your heart, and they take that and believe that you sing out of a hymnal book And instruments don't tie into what that verse says. It doesn't say make music with a guitar or with a piano or anything like that. And I visited other churches, and you can be a believer, a spiritual person, a Christian person, and still play a piano at your church, as far as I'm concerned. But I have broadened my mind as an older person now. But growing up in that church, no, it was a cappella only singing. And you had the four elders, the eight deacons, and the preacher. And that was sort of the hierarchy system. You had missionaries that would come and visit. They would kind of come and collect money, and they would go and teach and spread the word to other areas. One that particularly stands out as a kid to me, because I always loved when missionaries came, because they spoke in a different way. They weren't just kind of reading out Old Testament scripture. They were very dynamic in their speaking, because they were going out and trying to, you know, get people to become believers. And they were going over to like very poor countries and building churches like in tents and huts or whatever. And they were teaching people this hierarchy system, because at the principle of it all, the Church of Christ members were the only ones who were going to go to heaven. Not the Methodist, not the Baptist, no other church that you can think of just as a normal list of churches. None of those churches, none of the people in those churches were going to make it to heaven. Not because they were bad, but because they weren't following the way. And there was only one church, period. And so that's kind of the principle as far as the way it was made. As far as women, their role in the church was to serve the men and children. They filled up the little cups, the little communion that was passed around, the little tiny cups with grape juice, and the little plates that had the little bread cracker things. When communion was served, the ladies got together. They did that. They threw any wedding or baby showers. They taught the Sunday school classes and took care of the babies up until age 8, which was the age of accountability. And at that point, a female could not teach a male. So all of the male members of the church, or not members even, if these kids hadn't been baptized, any male child of the church could not be taught by a female Sunday school teacher after age 8. So the girls were taught separately. And there was a reason for that, because those girls were being taught their place. This is your place in the church. And the boys were being sort of shaped into future deacons, future elders, or even just future good disciples of the church. And they were taught to marry into the church, to marry women that they had grown up with in the church, and they would marry and they would have children who would go to the church, and so on. And so when I stepped back and I started having questions, which were not cool, it was not cool to question. And still in most religions, you shouldn't question God. You should just have faith and believe. But as far as the principles of this actual church, you shouldn't question why there's a hierarchy, why women can't do this, why women can't do that. And here's my little rebellious self who's like, why can't I lead singing? Why do I have to go to this Sunday school class? I want to go over here with, so-and-so. Well, I got explained in a very brief explanation of why, but I always had more questions because I didn't think it made sense to me. But the women took care of the babies and very young children, and then the girls over age 8, and then they also served the men. If we had a dinner or fellowship, they um, prepared the meals, they set out, all the dishes. The men got in line, they ate, they fixed their plates and sat down and ate first. So they were served first, all of that sort of thing. The women in the church, they knew their place, and a lot of them had married into the church. Like I said, I was born into the church because my mother, my aunt, my grandparents, everybody. It was a hierarchy thing, my grandfather being an elder. That's just the way it was. My sister, she's now passed away. She was right there beside me. She didn't ask as many questions as I did. She wasn't, an angel by any stretch of the means. We both did our crazy stuff as teenagers or whatever, but she wasn't as observant or I hate to say didn't care as much, but I questioned everything too much for them. And I'm all about fairness and justice. Again, that ties back to what I ended up going into my schooling, psychology, criminal justice, is, I had questions about how things worked, why the mind works this way, why the belief system works this way. And justice, obviously, tying back to criminal justice. But I didn't believe it was fair in the way things were sort of set up in this church. And I went, like I said, we would load up in a van and the youth would go and visit other churches where we could meet other young people our age. And they would have singings, and they would have like a group that would come down. And like this group was like, you would follow a band. It was like a concert, but these guys, it would be like 4 guys, and their band, their so-called band, would just be an a cappella singing group. And, that was always cool to go to another church and actually get to meet other kids, because we didn't have that many kids that were our age, but yet we were sort of expected to pair off with another guy and marry into the church and have kids, and them also go to church and blah, blah, blah from there on. Again, I had a lot of questions about all of that. And I was told at one point that there's a part of scripture somewhere that women are disruptive to the church. And that's why there is a place for them to take care of the kids and the husbands and whatever, that their questions are disruptive, that they disrupt the message that is being sent. And the whole message, the primary message in the middle, is that we're the only ones who are going to make it to heaven. And we are going to make it there by following these certain things that are more Old Testament than New Testament. And a big part of that, like I said, is going so strictly by the word that there's no music in the church. Make music with your hearts. No musical instruments. Sing. One of the others is they were very big on lust of the flesh. They were big on the fact that the women, if you dressed a certain way, or if you did certain activities with boys, that it would cause the boys to have lust and bad things would happen. So it was the women, it was their fault. And so you were taught from age 8 up, while the boys were separated from you, how to be a young lady and grow up in the church, how to act, how to dress, how to be, and what your role was going to be. And I didn't like a lot of it, questioned a lot of it. And I stuck out because in my family of the grandchildren, Three of them within their up to, I'm going to say by age 14, were all baptized into the church. And I was the only one who was not, because I didn't feel like I should be unless I 100% believed in everything. And I still didn't. I had so many questions. Yes, I believed in God. Yes, I prayed. Yes, I was a spiritual person, but I couldn't say that I believed in everything. I went to camp. At camp, we could not wear shorts. It would promote lust. It would cause the boys to have some sort of lust or whatever. We couldn't have any physical activities together. We couldn't play sports together. We could not swim together. Oh, no, 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 no. We could only eat together in like the fellowship little tent, or we could go to like singing or worship services together. Other than that, the girls were kept separate from everything. We could only be with other girls. And back then, this was truly camping. We didn't have any air conditioning or any of that. We had like a tent, a big, huge tent, like where everyone ate. We had cabins with no air conditioner. They were literally built like with logs, like a little log cabin, cute little cabins, and they were named after different trees like sycamore and like, I don't know, I can't even think right now, chestnut and whatever. And they were by age groups. And I would always beg them every year to let me go into like one higher up group than what I was supposed to be in, because I didn't have any friends my age. And the only people I knew were usually my sister's friends. And she didn't even want to go to camp. She went one year and she didn't make it the whole week. She hated it. She was miserable. She begged to come home, like went to the preacher's office, because there would be a different preacher every week that would come from a church and would sort of sponsor that week. And most of the people from his church would come that week. Um, I would tend to go on a week that my preacher wasn't there so I could meet other people, because I thought it was cool to meet people from not even that far away, but like, I don't know, an hour away. They would go to a church about an hour away, and we would all sort of come to this one camp. But hot, blazing hot summertime, you could not wear shorts. So you can only imagine burning up, no air conditioning. You did get to swim, but only with the girls. And on a whole other side of the camp, there was a big creek that separated the boys' side from the girls' side. And then, like I said, there was, I think, a talent show at the very end of camp that we could be together. We could be together for like worship service slash singing, and we could be together for eating. But like if we played badminton or if we canoed or if we did any kind of physical activity, we could not do it with boys because it would promote lust for some reason. We could not wear shorts or any type of revealing clothing at all. We couldn't swim with them, etc. Still, no instruments, even talent night. We could do like a little skit that was biblical based. We could sing a song, but it had to be appropriate. I'll never forget the song that I wanted to sing was Aerosmith's Angel. And one of the lyrics is, I'm sleeping in this bed alone. We had to change it to, I'm standing here all alone. Because sleeping in this bed alone was not cool for us to sing. Me and my little group that decided that's the song we were going to perform. We didn't have any music. It was just us up there singing the lyrics, but we had to change that lyric. Whatever. I'll never forget that. But in a way it was fun, but in a way it was miserable hot. And I'm glad now I've not visited and seen for myself, but I've looked, and they have a website now, and I've like just heard through the grapevine or whatever that now they do have air conditioning. They have relaxed the rules a bit. Like, I don't think they allow like booty shorts or anything, but they allow like knee length or capri top something. So they're not like sweltering. I think that they can do like the arts and crafts or something together, like they're tiptoeing into, you can do some activities together, but still not physical activities, still no swimming together or anything like that. So that's the camp part of things. And when you would go, you would get dropped off. You would have to earn money to go and pay to go. Usually, what we did was a walkathon, and we would get people to sponsor us. We would walk however many miles or whatever, and we would have like a little form, and we would earn a certain amount, and that would be our entrance money to go to camp for a week. We literally wrote physical snail mail letters to our family that by the time it got there, hell, camp was about over. But if we wanted to go home, like I said, my sister, she went to the preacher slash nurse's office and just cried until she got to go home. Like that was her ticket out, and she never wanted to go back. I went, and like I said, I begged to be with the older one group older than me because they were my sister's friends. I didn't really have a lot of friends, and that way I would at least have someone. And I don't know how I pulled that off, but there's one thing I can be thankful about. But I never could wrap my mind around the fact that if we played a game with them, we were going to cause them lust. If we wore shorts and decided we didn't want to burn up in 98-degree weather, we were going to cause them lust. Like we were responsible for their behavior. That bothered me. That was just one of many things that bothered me. But so that was camp. I can, like I said, if there's enough interest, if enough people even see this, then I can answer more questions. But there's camp, there's the hierarchy, there's the role I've kind of went over, there's the whole thing about music. Um, Another fun fact or whatever is no prom, no dancing. You could not dance with a man until you were married to him. So when you were in high school, if you had friends that went to the church with you, they they honestly didn't until later on come up with the idea of an alternate prom where you could still get dressed up and get your picture made or whatever, but there was no dancing, no prom. So at that time, you just didn't get to go, period. And if you did, you better keep it on the down low because dancing with a man before you're married, no. And so as a woman, you were taught, like I said, we were separated at age 8. A woman was too ignorant to teach a boy age 8 or above. They only taught babies, kids under 8, mixed boys and girls under 8, babies. And then they taught young ladies because we were being taught our role in the church. We had a specific class we went to that started at about age 12 or 13. And we went to till about, I don't know, 16, 17 or so before we ended up going on into the big church service with where our parents were or whatever. And during that time, we were taught about sex. We were taught about the whole lust of the flesh thing. We were taught scripture and how this scripture meant this, how this translated into why we did this as young ladies. The two ladies that taught it were old ladies. And they were not very nice. And I remember being in the class and just wanting to raise my hand and ask a million questions. And I think I did at first until I got shot down so many times that it was just like, okay, this is pointless. I'm going to sit here and just listen because I don't believe in all of this. I believe in God. I want to be a godly person. I want to pray. I want to sing. I want to do all these things. But there's a lot of other things that I don't think I believe. I don't think we're too ignorant to teach a boy over age 8. I don't think we have to be baptized by this certain age or we're going to hell. I don't think we're the only church that's going to make it to heaven. I don't think that we're responsible if we wear a pair of shorts that we're going to cause a boy to do something and that it's our responsibility, that we can't play a game with them. All of this, it bothered me. We can't have a piano or any type of music. If we do have the singing, which we have some beautiful singers, like I can't go up there and lead the singing. Um, you couldn't speak at all. You could not go up in front of the church and speak at all. Um, I'll end up later, like I said, if this even brings enough interest, and I'll tell you later, like way later in life, after I stopped going to church, broke away, and stopped. Like I said, I had two daughters, and I had to really think hard about, is this what I want to teach them? And it was not. And I've given them freedom in going to different churches and deciding, because I was just born into this and I was not given that freedom. Again, I don't have any ill will toward my parents who passed on, my grandparents, any of that, because that's what they were born into. That's what they believed. But when I started looking back at all of this, this does meet the criteria for a cult, and keeping it continuing, as far as we're one group, we're the only ones making it to heaven. We have to follow this strict belief system. There is a hierarchy, and women are on a lower sort of rung as far as they serve men. Just like I said, even almost back to Old Testament, and no instruments, don't dance with a man until you've married him. A lot of it, when I've started looking at other cults and studying them, because I'm fascinated, I'm like, oh my God, we had that in our church too. Like the one young lady I said I watched who was in the order, and they actually lived in like a commune type situation where we did not. We just went on Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. Every time the doors were open, my family anyway, we had to be there. Had to be there. And it was kind of like school. Like you didn't just not go because you didn't feel like going. You had to have a really good reason for not being there. They took attendance just like school. If you missed, you would get a call, and they would be like, are you okay? We noticed you weren't at church Sunday. That kind of thing. They had a bus where they would pick up people who didn't have a transportation or a way to get there. They would send deacons or members of the church out to elderly or disabled people's homes, and they would pass out a tape of the sermon and sit there with them and answer any questions so that they could still be a part of things and not lose that, because back then, they couldn't say, go log on to the website and watch. I'm trying to think if I've missed anything that's like, wow, that's different. One of the things as I got older, and I still wasn't getting baptized, that bothered me is some of the wording. And like I said, they were going back to some Old Testament stuff. And it was like, you have to be buried in a watery grave of baptism to rise again, to be born as a new, washed, your sins are washed away, and you rise again. So again, it was, you're going up here into a baptistry, you're going to be dunked completely underwater, raised back up, and your sins are washed away. But it wasn't that simple. The wording sounded horrible and terrifying to me. Buried, watery grave, horrible. And here I am, my cousins, my other young people around me, they've all gotten baptized by now. I'm a teenager, and I'm still like, I don't know about this. And I wasn't going to do it to be cool or because everyone else had done it. A lot of people got baptized at camp. A lot. Because it was like, oh, well, my friends are doing it, so I'm going to do it too. But the ones who didn't, they got baptized at church. It was sort of expected. By that age of accountability, you were supposed to be tiptoeing toward joining the church. That belief system, and making sort of a commitment to, I'm going to marry into the church. My kids are going to follow this, blah, blah, blah. And I hadn't gotten there. I didn't believe that. I didn't agree. I had too many questions, etc. Um, there's something I was going to say right before that. Oh, yeah. Another thing, and this was kind of later, one of the things that made a deciding factor for me. And I know I said I wasn't going to make this long, and I've been talking forever, and I'm going to have to like just stop before I don't have a voice anymore. But um, is like I said, I had two daughters, but I would look around the church and I would see teachers, nurses, um, really smart ladies who had gone to school, who had master's degrees. Um, and then I would look at the guys who, yeah, they were hardworking men, but a lot of them hadn't finished school. They were, blue collar workers. And again, good men, they provided for their families, but how could they say we were ignorant or disruptive when these women were clearly very smart, very accomplished? It bothered me. It bothered me bad. And as I got older and I got my master's and I had a career, it still bothered me. And then when I had my two children, both girls, I was bothered into, am I going to teach them they have a place? This is what it is. If they don't do this, they're not going to go to heaven. And they are ignorant no matter how smart they really are. Just all of that. They can't go to their prom. They can't, go to another church that has music. They're going to go to summer camp and burn up in freaking jeans and just all of that. And some of that seems trivial to you guys, but it was so not. Because when I would talk to my other friends from school or whatever, they would be like, we're having a lock-in at our church. And I'm like, what is that? They're like, we're spending the night at church and we're going to eat pizza and we're going to blah, blah. And I'm like, boys and girls? And they were like, yeah. What? Like, that seemed so just bizarre to me. And like, they're getting ready for prom and stuff. And I'm like, well, we're not supposed to go to prom. You're not supposed to dance with somebody before you're married. They're like, what are you talking about? Or like, my friend's mom played the piano at her church. And I was like, you're not supposed to have music in your church. You're supposed to make music with your heart. And so many things didn't connect the dots. So many things didn't add up as a woman growing up in this church. And so when it took me a long time to get to the point where I realized it wasn't for me. It also really bothered me that unless we conform to all of this and were baptized and continued on and continued and made sure that we married into the church, had children, blah, 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 or we were going to go to hell. That bothered me. I ended up marrying someone who was not in the church. I also ended up getting divorced, which is something that's not allowed. Once you get married, you are with that person forever. You keep those vows forever, which I can say I've kept those vows. I haven't remarried. I haven't been with anyone else, but it's not because of that, because I've already broken away from the church. I don't attend. But a divorce was big frowned upon. They did believe in corporal punishment of your children. They did believe, like, to a certain extent, your man was to keep you in place, and you weren't really supposed to come and cry about that. Adultery, that was not okay. The guy he didn't get a pass on cheating. You could get remarried if your spouse passed away, but you still were expected to marry back into the church. And there were widowers and widows in the church. And, that was like, I guess, your dating pool or whatever. But, again, corporal punishment was accepted to keep whoever in line that needed to be kept in line. There was one more thing that had come to my mind I wanted to say before I wrapped up. And there's going to be other things that come to my mind later. I'm going to wish I'd said something about, and maybe enough of y'all will watch this and you'll have questions and you'll care enough to want for me to answer those, and I can wrap this up, and then the next video I do be a more fun thing about one of my music adventures, and I can show some pictures of where I got to meet someone, and um, I have a lot of cool stories like that, a lot of music memorabilia and autographs and pictures and things. But this one was something that, because so much talk is being done right now about cults and the definition of cults and whatever, that there are still till current day churches. But if you really look at the principles of these churches, they are in a way cults. And to believe that you're the only ones going to heaven if you do A, B, and C, I don't agree with that. I think every person has their own relationship with God. I believe that you can be a spiritual person and that your God can be whatever. I have no influence, and I don't desire to have any influence on your relationship with whomever and on your religious beliefs at all. I only need to be worried about mine. And that's not something I was taught. Oh, I know what it was. Growing up, here's something, and a lot of people have, made jokes about it or whatever, but it's just something weird that happened. Our church building that I went to was a really beautiful building, or what I thought, for in the 70s. It was just really pretty. It had some stained glass. It was simple, like one of those A-frame top buildings. I always wanted one of those houses, like an A-frame house. But anyway, it was like that. It was very simple. You could tell, very 70s like, whatever. But I thought it was really pretty. Always loved it. But there were way bigger, more elaborate churches in the area. But ours was simple. And this really happened. Again, this is probably getting way too detailed into where I am, but whatever. Again, I don't feel any ill will toward any of those people. We had some amazing, incredible people who I will always, always, till my last day, say that they were amazing, good hearted, kind, giving people. I just didn't believe what they were 100% telling me to believe. Um, our church got struck by lightning and burned to the ground. Not lying, no joke. People made jokes about it, but we had to go and find another building and have church there for about a year while they rebuilt our church from the ground up. And when they rebuilt it, it looked way more like, I don't know, institutionalized, really plain, really just blah to me. It never had that same look as when I was a kid growing up. It wasn't as beautiful. It was just very bricks, kind of plain, just looked like any other building. And I missed that old building. It never felt the same ever. And but that really happened. 100% not exaggerating to make this sound amazing. It just happened. It was struck by lightning in a storm and burned all the way to the ground. And not that's just one of the things I wanted to include, not to make light of anything or to say it was evil and that's why it happened, which was the joke of a lot of people. But I think I've pretty much covered like fun facts and kind of the hierarchy and kind of why you could see in a lot of ways that it met or does, because it still operates, meet criteria as what one could consider a cult. And I just, I couldn't follow. And I definitely couldn't send and raise my children, as females especially, into that and have them follow that and tell them you are only going to go to heaven. It doesn't matter how good of a person you are. It doesn't matter what you do or how you live your life. Unless you go to this building 3 times a week, unless you submit yourself to, men, and you only do this role, and you don't do this and you don't do that, and you can't lead singing, and you can't stand up and speak in front of a group, and blah blah blah. If you don't do any of that, it's the only way you're going to make it to heaven. I just couldn't. Oh, one more thing. I know I keep saying it. This is important though. I always, when I was younger, wanted to be Catholic because I would see on movies that you could go into a booth and you could confess your sins, and they would tell you, whatever, do this, and you would be forgiven. Um, at this current day, just to overshare or whatever, I don't go to any physical church. So that doesn't even matter. I do still have a relationship and have my own. Like I said, it's not my place to influence you or yours to influence me. But when I was a kid, I thought that was so cool because it was private. And when I would talk about it to anybody, they would say, "Why? Why is that so special?" or whatever. I mean, it's kind of cool, but what's your big deal about it being private? And it was because in our church, if you committed a sin, it was considered public. And if you had been baptized, you didn't get saved. You hear a lot of people say, well, I was baptized when I was 8 or whatever, but later in life, I did a lot of bad things and I recommitted myself to the church and I was saved. At our church, you went up in front of the church and you could, I guess you could, if you were a guy, speak and say what you had did wrong, and that you had brought shame upon the church, and that you were asking for forgiveness, and that it was a public sin. If you're a female, you weren't going to address the church publicly anyway because that's not appropriate. So you would get an index card handed to you. You would sit on the front bench and everyone would be staring at you, and you would sit down and write out your sin, what you had done. And then you would hand it to the preacher, and he would go up to the front and say, today, I'm going to make up a name. Samantha Jones comes to the church saying that she has publicly sinned by, I don't know, I can't even think of what something would be right now, just right off the top of my head. That she, um, I don't know, coveted something that her neighbor had, and she was jealous, and she, whatever. Or she dated someone outside of the church and she went to the prom with him and felt like she had lust of the flesh and that she had gone against the church, and it was public in the sense that there were pictures and other people saw that she was there. She had danced with a man before marriage, blah blah. I mean, whatever. It could be anything. It could be something very small that no one even knew about or would ever even know about. But this person felt so guilty that they needed to go up there and confess it. But it wasn't in a booth privately. It wasn't you and the preacher sitting down privately. It was read out loud. And if 5 people went up there, you had to stay. You could be there on a Sunday an hour late because they were reading. Samantha comes before the church, blah, blah, blah. Joseph comes before the church. He wants to speak his, and he got to stand up and actually speak his. He didn't have to, write it on a card unless he just wanted to write out bullet points of what he was going to say. Um, you know, Alyssa comes before the church. And so after all of that, then it would be okay. Now we ask for you to bow your heads and pray for these people and the sins that they committed, etc. You didn't have to be baptized again, but you did have to publicly confess. And if you did not do that, you were not going to go to heaven. So there were all these things that you had to do to go to heaven. And if you didn't do all these things and live your life in this way, and were a part of the church, the only church, you were not going to go to heaven. You could have your very best friend who went to church every Sunday at the Baptist church, and their dad was the preacher there or whatever. And in your heart, you would be sitting there breaking, thinking they're going to go to hell because they don't go to the church. And that I could never reconcile that in my mind, that there was this good person who prayed, who lived a good life, who went to a church on Sunday, but because they had music in their church or because they weren't the church of Christ, they were going to go to hell. I could never be okay with that. And so that's just me hitting some of the high points. And I know I've gone on way too long, but that was the way I was raised from 0 to 34 years old, when I decided, after I was married, after I had 2 children of my own, to leave. And I even had an issue when I left of, you need to come sit down with the elders of the church and talk about this. Like, they weren't really about letting me go quietly, you know. And that was another strange thing to me. And by that time, my grandfather had already passed on. He had stepped down when he'd gotten older and in bad health, and one of the deacons stepped up and took his place. Oh, another thing, the elders took a role. Like, one of the elders oversaw the money of the church, the finances. Another elder oversaw like the groundskeeping, making sure the building and the grass and, whatever was all taken care of. Another one was about mission work and attendance and outreach and making sure people had transportation and the youth activities and whatever. Like, each elder had a thing, and then they had 2 deacons under them training. But like, say my grandfather got into bad health and he decided it was best for the church for him to step down, then one of those 2 men under him, whoever was the most qualified, stepped up into that role. And then his vacancy that was left, one deacon vacancy, they would have a vote, and another young man from the church we chosen to fall into his place, and so on. So it was always that hierarchy. So there's another thing that just came to my mind. But yeah, I also watched horribly after our church had burned, and I was going to church temporarily in a building while our new church was being built. We were just temporarily going there, just a place to meet. My sister and I were sitting together, and we had been out that weekend, and we were both not feeling being there that Sunday morning. But you didn't get a choice. Like, you were supposed to be there. You better be there. You were going to get a call about why you weren't there. So for our mom, it was, you're going. We're not going to be getting a call about why we weren't there. And you're supposed to go anyway. You need to know your role. One of the elders who was getting in bad health got up to lead the closing prayer, and church was over. We're going to get to finally go eat lunch. This has gone on for a long time. And this older guy was up there in the middle of his prayer. He has a heart attack and falls out on the floor. Promise you. We'll never forget it, ever, ever, ever. And that man passed away. He passed away doing what he believed, 100% doing what he loved. And, you know, I had a broader belief of who was going to heaven or hell or whatever. And it had nothing to do, even then, when I was a teenager, with a hierarchy or that church or anything. I just knew he was a good man. And he, in front of our eyes, that happened. So many weird things, so many different things that I'm going to think about after. But I really do think I hit all of the high points. And definitely, if somebody watches this, if you don't have a question, I'm going to be surprised, because I don't think everybody considers this church as what they would list as a cult. But when you really start putting it all together and you step back and you look at it, which is what it took me to do, then you see it does fall in with that. But lots of people who weren't in that church, who didn't grow up like that, should, I would think, have questions or it be a discussion point. So if that's the case, please comment and just say, I'd like for you to do a question and answer, or I'd like you to do a panel. That's something I've never done on here, but with tech help from my daughter, we've looked at it, and that's something I can do. And I would be happy to do that and continue this. I said I would be willing to do 2 parts, and then I do want to move on because this is a serious topic, and I'm going to be tired after I wrap this up here in like literally a few seconds. Um, and I do want to do more fun things, but with the cult thing coming up in more topics lately, and the whole Odinism thing, and the FDLS, and just all of the things that we've been hearing about more and more, I wanted to explain, you know, something that I was a part of and I didn't even realize until later could be considered a cult upbringing. And then my kind of funny, I guess, story wouldn't have been so funny if I would have went with him, I don't guess, but that I almost left with a very different kind of commune type cult when I was younger in New Orleans. And um, look those guys up. Like I said, there's a little bit out there somewhere in YouTube land. Some of their music I know is still out there. Zendik Tribe, Zendik Tribe. They have nothing to do with the church that I grew up in, which is what you'll see as abbreviation, the COC, Church of Christ. Not Church of God, not Church of God in Christ. There's all these deviations, especially in the South, but it's truly the Church of Christ. And as I was taught, the only way, the only church that you would find your way making it to heaven, period. So, and your role as a female in that church was very, very black and white. Long list of this is what you do, this is what you don't do, but mostly it's this is what you don't do. You didn't have a role in the church, not a big role at all. You just had a long list of things of you don't do this, because it can influence our young men in a way where they're not going to move up to be deacons or elders, and the church won't go on, and we won't get to heaven. So, anyway, that was how I was growing up, raised, whatever you want to say. It's not the way that most people that I have talked to, which I'm not a very like busy bee. I don't have a lot of friends. I really don't. Not asking for anybody to have a pity party. It's just the way it is. I'm a very, as I've gotten older, and you know, now having some health issues, and I don't like go to work every single day, and I'm not married anymore, and haven't been for several years. I was with the same person for 20 years, and I just haven't changed my life. I'm raising my children, and I'm starting to make some friends on here, which is a wonderful thing. But even that is a slow process because there are so many choosing side type things on here that I will not be a part of because of all that you just heard. I don't need that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not choosing anybody's side. I'd love to make friends on here, and I have made some, and I would love to make friends with people who have common interest. Um, I think it's a great place to meet people from all over the world and to talk about things and to sing and enjoy time with and whatever. And that's what I'm about. And I'm not about anything more than that. And I'm not going to be in any kind of weird gang or have my name be this because I'm with this certain group and whatever. I even had somebody say something weird about my name being Undercover Mermaid, which, if you'll look back, this page has existed since like 2015. I've always been Undercover Mermaid when I used to read tarot cards on here. And I can go into that on another one of my fun fact stories later. Uh, I'm not a spy because my name says undercover. I'm not undercover for anybody. I just thought it was cool because when you think about an undercover mermaid, it's a person walking around, but undercover, they really can sprout a tail and swim underwater. And I'm a Pisces as far as my astrological sign, and I love talking about that kind of stuff. So I thought it was a cute name, Undercover Mermaid. And I also like true crime stuff, so undercover. Anyway, not changing my name because someone thinks it means something weird. Also, not changing my name or my picture because I belong to some little group or because I don't like this group. That stuff is ridiculous, especially if you're a 40 something year old person and you have kids of your own. And I don't know. It To step back and to watch some of this stuff blows my mind because there's enough pain and enough hurt that I know I've lived through and that I'm watching other people go through right now. A possible war, and this is what we're doing? No, I'm not doing it. And it's sad if I'm going to lose some friends, the very, very few that I've made on here because of that. But I'm not doing it. I'm going to go to the pages that I want to, that I find entertaining, that I've met good people on, and I'm going to keep going there. And if I end up feeling like unwanted because I want to choose some kind of side or whatever, then I'll just move on. Sad, but true. And I think we could all do better on here. I'm never going to have a big page or anything like that. I don't expect that. I struggle. I'm sure you can see on here. Like I said, I've had people that have left. My numbers aren't big. I lose two people and I'm kind of sad about it. And it's, well, you have too many memorial songs and it's a downer. That's not going to change. I'm going to sing a song if it's one of my loved ones have passed, and that's a way that I'm grieving and it helps me. And it also is a way to like a memorial to them. I'm going to do it. And if that's too much of a downer or sad, then oh well. This page is for whoever it's for. It reaches whoever it's intended to reach. And like I said, the few friends that I have made on here, I cherish that. I'm so glad that I found you, that you found me in whatever page or whatever place we found each other. And I hope that that can continue. We can email each other. We can um, maybe even talk on the phone someday. We can be in chat back and forth, and we can continue with our shared interest. But anything beyond that is crazy. The whole undercover thing, I just was like, please go back to my page and see how long I've had this name. I am not changing it. I am not a spy, and this is not gangland. This is crazy. So, I'll end it with that we're still, aside from this kind of very different upbringing I've had in current day on YouTube streets, we're still doing some very just insane stuff, some things that don't make sense, that are unnecessary when we've got really bigger world issues going around. And we're wasting time with that when everyone has something interesting to say. They have a story, they have something that we could all share and learn from or enjoy together. And, let's do that instead. We could all do better. I'm not trying to be a preacher tonight, but we could all do better. And I'm just going to say, I don't want to lose any of the friends that I've made, because it's really hard for me to make friends. And I am struggling. I struggle all the time with my health right now. And I'm a single mom, and just having lost a lot of my family. Just, I could continue to sit here and have a pity party. But I'm just going to say, the few friends that I made on here, I hope not to lose them because of some crazy thing like that, because it is crazy. I don't hurt anyone, and I don't like feeling hurt because I want to choose a side about something that I don't even understand. And I don't even think some of them understand. It's just like, I'm going to follow because I'm afraid not to, or I'm going to follow because, you know, this happened to someone that I don't even know. I've never met them or even messaged privately with them, but it sounds like it was a bad thing. And so I'm going to follow this group. No, that's not me. I do have groups of people, like I said, that I hang out with, from karaoke, from criminal justice pages, from true crime, from whatever pages, but I'm not falling into any type of group and limiting myself, because it's hard enough in this world today to make a friend and to have somebody to talk to. And um, I don't know. I'm guessing that from everything I've said, if you go back and listen to, I've rambled way too long. But you'll see in the past I've led, some interesting. I've led an interesting life, and I'm glad I got to do that while I was able, while I was young, because I'm not able to do a lot of that stuff now. But I have a lot of things I would love to share with you guys. But please go back and listen, because I know I see a couple of people popping up. Jen B, if you're still here, even, and Tattooed Angel. Hey, I think y'all are the only two that I had on here. Um, but I know some people I talked to before this that were going to have to go to bed early, had work or something. They were going to have to wake up the next day, and they were going to play back. So please go back and watch. And if you have questions and you're interested in me doing another one and answering some of those, I will, or doing a panel and discussing it, I will. And then we'll kind of close the chapter on this topic. And then I'll do the rest of them will be more music related, probably. And I'll show pictures of people that I've been lucky enough to get to meet, and talk about some of the concerts and trips and travel things I've done, because I do want to share that with people. I don't have a lot of friends on Facebook where most of those pictures and memorabilia and all that stuff is posted, and so I can share that here. Like I said, this is my page. It's not about any kind of weird side or anything like that. I'm going to post a song every now and again if I want to sing it, or do one of my memory things. And then tonight was something new. It's just something I kind of wanted to get off my chest and talk about the way I was raised and how it was different, and how it could be in a category as a cult, if you want to, categorize it. And a lot of people do list it as that. And it was a very tough upbringing, and it was something that I chose not to continue with my kids. And I don't know, check it out. And it still continues to this day. And there are some really good people that go to that church. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying that's not a way, after growing up in that church, that I could ask my children to commit to. Because I don't believe that the people under the roof of that church are the only people that are going to make their way to heaven, or that are the only people that are going to be considered good people. I think we have a lot of good people. Just like we have a lot of bad people, we do have a lot of good people. And I hope you guys on this big, wide web here, um, I hope y'all find other good people, because we need each other. We all struggle, especially right now with the world the way it is. We all struggle with depression, anxiety. We all have something going on in our lives. And we could really use friends. Um, we could use just topics to learn about things that we're interested in, and use your page if you have one. Use your other friends if you're just somebody who kind of sits back and watches, and you're not really like a leader. You don't get up on panels or anything. You just kind of are more hanging back in the chat. Be that person in the chat that's a friend. I'm going to tell you, I've met a few people in chats that on a really hard day, I never talked to them on the phone. I never messaged them on Facebook. Just them talking to me in the chat that day is what got me through a really hard day. So try to be that for people, because we have a choice on here. We have a choice off of here as well. But anyway, I hope all of you have a really good night. I hope that you will leave a comment and let me know. Thank you, Angel. I appreciate that. And I always think of you guys too. We're all raising kids in a really difficult world, a difficult time right now. And um, teaching them and talking to them about what's going on in the world around us, that's tough too for us as parents. And so a lot of us don't have a lot of time to go out and make friends out physically in the world. So we find our friends on here, and we do find good people on here who, pray for us, who care about us. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I think that's a wonderful thing. And I hope that's what we find instead of the bad. But I'll bring this to a close. Go back and watch. You can learn some like fun facts, if you want to say, or some like, wow, I didn't realize that was, a church that still goes on, or that's the way people still, operate. But yes, that's the way I grew up. It's a church that still continues on just down the road, honestly. And I just wanted to kind of explain it, that's something that could be considered, and a lot of people do list it, just like some of the other things that are coming to light in criminal justice and true crime cases. It's the same. It's listed in kind of the same category. But I will be happy to answer any questions if I missed anything. Like I said, I kind of hit the more sensationalized, or the wow, is really that's the way they expected you to believe. I think I kind of hit those points, and why I left, how I became a part of it to begin with, all of that. And then I also told you the fun story at the beginning that didn't really have anything to do with my upbringing, just a crazy thing that happened to me as a teenager, and how, had I made one decision differently, I would have probably not been right here talking to you. I'm not sure what in the heck would have been happening to me, but definitely lived a very different life had I gone that day. Um, the only other thing, this has nothing to do with anything, but Kat, if you end up watching, I know you were going to watch on one of the other ones. I had to cancel. I've rescheduled so many times. I, if you'll look back on some of my old videos where I used to read tarot cards, I used to be interested in crystals and like charging crystals under, like if the full moon is out, a lot of people put their crystals out and charge them. If they, a lot of people believe in like healing and nature and things like that. And I grasp because I do have some health issues at things that could help me that are like natural remedies or whatever. And I learned about moon water, and that you could put, just like your crystals, you could put a bowl of water out under a full moon, just water, plain water, in a clear container, and just leave it out and let the moon shine down on it. And you could keep that in a container, and you could drink it. You can rub that, for my, in my case, rub it on my feet and my legs where I have some severe issues going on and some severe pain. And you know what? It can't hurt. And it's the moon that God created, if you believe. Um, and like I said, sometimes we grasp at what could help, and it definitely can't hurt. But funny story, kind of funny, but kind of upsetting for me is I made some when we had one of the big super moons and used it all. And like I said, drank some, just water, and then put some on my feet and my legs. And I was out and was going to do some on this last big full moon. And I put it out, and my daughter went out the next day to get it, and it was gone. Literally, the container was gone. The thing that I had put over it, like the clear wrap, was there. It was left there. But the container was gone. And it was a glass container, clear glass container. So my moon water got stolen. And I figured you might get a giggle out of that if you're watching, Kat, because I had intentions of drinking it or putting it on my legs or whatever, like I said, as a sort of natural, hopeful, just whatever. And it got stolen. I don't think an animal would have taken it because it's just water. And it was wrapped up pretty good. So, again, and it was a glass container. Most animals would have been like, okay, this is just water. I'm not going to go to all the trouble to unwrap it and then drag a dang glass container off. And my child walked around and around, all around the perimeter of our property, and could not find it anywhere. So weird, oddly enough, someone, I don't know, took my moon water. And I kind of live off, like, I don't have any super nearby neighbors. I'm in a dead end road. It's not like I have people right up close to me and somebody was like, hee hee, I'm going to take it. One, no one knew I put it out there. Two, some people don't even know what moon water is. And for whatever, like I said, it couldn't hurt. Right now I'm grasping because I do live with such difficulty. And but someone stole my moon water. So anyway, thought you might get a kick out of that, Cat. So I'm having to wait for the next full moon. And my daughter's a little bit sad because it was her container that it was in, and that's gone now. But I still am just blown away. I don't think it could have been animal, because they would have been so bored that it didn't smell like anything. And it was glass, so it would have been heavy to try to drag. And there would have been pieces of it somewhere, crushed or whatever. But it was gone. Moon water, gone. So I'm having to wait for the next cycle. Anyway, I meant to say that at the beginning, but it didn't really fit in with anything else. It still doesn't. But if you watch this, Cat, and you get to the end of this, you'll at least get a laugh. And if anybody's watching right now, they're probably like, what in the heck is she talking about? But it's a whole thing about if you are into crystals or natural remedies or healing or things like that. It's not any kind of witchcraft or anything. It's nothing like that. It's just like a natural, hopeful thing that the full moon, if you look at astrological stuff and cycles of the moon and how people behave, and the healing properties that people find even from plants and things like that. It's all tied into that. But someone stole my moon water and it made me very sad. But next moon that comes around, I'll get some more. Anyway, hope you guys find this somewhat interesting. I got to just bare my soul and how I was brought up. And if you want me to do a part two, please leave the comments. If not, I'll do some more songs like I've been doing. Not all memorial songs. I'll just be doing some fun songs. I do plan on doing another one before Halloween. I said I was going to do another somewhat spooky kind of song, and I've got one planned. And then the next one of these I do, if no one is interested in a part two or question answer panel part two, then I'll do the next one on a music trip slash meeting I got to have, and I'll show some pictures and guitar picks and all that good stuff and tell the little story about who I got to meet, when, how, all that. I have lots of stories and I want to share them. I want to put them down somewhere. I haven't got enough discipline to write a book yet. But I do have a lot of interesting things I did, and I'm so glad I got to do them while I was able physically to do them. But anyway, hope you'll have a great night. Hope you will watch this, listen to it as you go to sleep, whatever, and enjoy it, learn from it. If you have a question, you don't have to put it in the comments. Just say, oh my God, I got some questions, girl. I'd love a part two. Or, okay, I see it doesn't look like you're going to have a part two. Do you mind if I send you a message and, you answer this part for me? I'm curious. I'll answer. Got nothing better to do than answer it. And I want to make sure I answered as much as I could completely enough so that it made somewhat sense tonight and that it was a full story. God knows I've talked long enough. It should have, but I would have questions. It would be interesting to me, because if I lived a completely different lifestyle or a different religion, this would be interesting and I would have questions. Trust me, but I'm that kind of person too. I like studying things like that. But anyway, I'm going to quit saying good night and then talking, good night and then talking. Good night. I hope you'll have a good morning, good night, wherever you are in the world. And please leave a comment if you want a continuation of this. And if not, then I'll sing some more and I'll pick a time and I'll do a different in between the music. That's what I'm going to call it. And thank you, Tattooed Angel and Jen B. Y'all are two good friends that I have made on here. And y'all do mean a lot to me. Thank y'all for watching, for coming by. Dazed. I know you told me ahead of time you had to get some sleep. I hope you got a good night's sleep for work. And thank you for coming by and, just letting me know, encouraging me. I appreciate that. There are some really good eggs on here, some good folks I've met. And I thank you for just being you. And anyway, I hope all of you, any of you that find this and listen to it, I hope that it meant something, it mattered, I don't know, made you think. And anyway, have a good night, have a good day, whichever, and I'll see you the next time, whether it's a song or the next in between the music.